amazing how long that minute is when you're watching the clock. Thank you for joining us for Together on Tuesday. Today is April 2nd, 2024. We are so excited. Today's topic, an education primer on 504s and IEPs in order to access education for your child. I know, having worked in doing the work that I do, both in undiagnosed circles and even outside of that, parents have lots of questions all the time about accessing an education for their child, either not understanding the law or how to just go about requesting for an evaluation or assessment to be done. So today we'll just barely scratch the surface because there's just so much information to be had, but we're gonna start with Casey Robertson. She is a parent to an undiagnosed daughter who is a UDN participant. She has lots of experience in the undiagnosed arena, and also a lot of experience in the special education arena. She does trainings nationally for special ed, particularly those who experience blindness. And so she has a ton to share, and she'll start today by talking about her own experience as a caregiver and parent of an undiagnosed child. And then, excuse me, she'll segue into introducing our guests, Carlton Walker and Ken Bauman. So Casey, do you want to get us started?
Thank you, Sarah. It is so wonderful to be here with all of our guests today that are here for the UDNF Together on Tuesday. My daughter is a participant for UDN. We are still currently undiagnosed at this moment, but our journey started in the education system when she was very small. I do special ed trainings, IEP trainings across the nation because I was a general education teacher and one of the first in my area that would accept disabled students into my classroom as an immersed classroom. And I did a lot of work with that before my daughter was born. And I currently work for Louisiana Tech University in their Teachers of Blind Students program. So I go across the country and I advocate for students to get services that they are required to have in our school system. So I knew the journey would be tough with my daughter in the education system, but I never knew how tough it would be. We started out when she was 3 with all the preschool, all the pre-academics that we needed to do, and I went ahead and had her assessed for an IEP. I got a little pushback because she did not have a single diagnosis, even though she sees like 17 doctors in 2 or 3 different states, and she did not become part of the UDN project until about 2 years ago. So we did not have an overall diagnosis. So they gave me a little pushback. However, at that time, when she was just 3 years old, she did fail some of the assessments that they gave her. So it showed that she did have delays so that we were able to obtain an IEP. That IEP carried over to her when she was in kindergarten. And this is where the real struggle came about. It seemed that we knew that we had 3 gene mutations, but we didn't know what those gene mutations were doing to affect her ability to learn or her ability to participate in school. She fit clearly under the law's definition of other health impairment, and the school was okay with that. They were okay with giving us the IEP. They were okay with giving us the other health impairment ruling, but they were not okay with educating her. We had a very well written IEP. However, their expectations for her were very minimal. She was not expected to learn to read. She was not expected to learn to do math. She was basically integrated into the kindergarten classroom, and but the expectations for her were set very different from those of her peers. So I began the fight to try to get her the equal education that her peers had. Well, unfortunately, when she was in first grade, she had to have a tumor removed from her spine and was out for half of the year. And the school system did not want to provide her any home-based education while she was out for that half of the school year. So we repeated that grade over. Well, as time progressed, her stamina got worse, her conditions got worse, and she was not able to attend school. So I had to fight. And when I use the word fight, I want to change that. I had to advocate. It felt like a fight to me, but I had to advocate for her to get homebound learning. When her least restrictive environment was no longer in the place of the school brick and mortar building, I had to advocate for her to get services at home. And I was met with a lot of varying opinions. Of one teacher basically looked at me and said, if she can't learn in school, if she's not going to progress, and if her diagnosis is unknown, then why are we even educating her? And I explained to them that as a parent of an undiagnosed child, I wanted her life to be as close to normal or as close to what her life should be as it could ever have been, even if she did not have a undiagnosed disease. So we got homebound services, and that went on for several years. But every year, the pressure and the burden was on myself to advocate to show that this was still her least restrictive environment. And the quality of educators that they would send out would be whoever was on the extra staff that they had. Most of the ones had never taught an academic child that could learn fully like her peers. However, her medical conditions prevented her from having the stamina of her peers, from having the her low immune system prevented her from being in the classroom with her peers, but academically she was able to learn. So a lot of the education fell on her father and myself after the hours of the school teacher would leave. She would want to come and read a book to her and then leave. But Kylie's capability was so much more than that. She could do so much more than that. And we knew that she could. So we had to keep raising those standards for her. And we had to keep the school informed on those standards. And they were very confused because we did not have a diagnosis for her. So every year they would just write in her IEP the 3 gene defects that she had with a statement of saying, we don't know how these are affecting her. So it was a long battle. As around 9th grade, the stamina of her parents, myself and her father, kind of ran out. I couldn't advocate for her in the medical arena and advocate for her in the school arena anymore. It was just too much. So we brought her to be a full homeschooled student. Now, I'm happy to announce that she is 17 now. We still do not have a diagnosis, but she is working on her first book of her life experience as an undiagnosed disease child. And she has gotten a good ways. We're getting close to having a rough draft to publish that book. And this is a child that her own school system did not believe that she could learn just because she was different and she had medical concerns. So today, that's just my story. That's just a small part of the story. I could speak hours about the parents that I have helped with gaining access to the educational system for their students because they have a right to learn. They have a right to be in the same education arena as their peers. Today, I have brought 2 experts in the field with me to discuss IEPs and 504s. The first person that we will speak with is Mr. Kenneth Bauman. He believes that everyone deserves to be treated equally under the law, especially our children. He is here to advocate for our children. He is with the Galini Law Firm, and I have worked with that law firm closely over multiple due process cases and mediation cases that have resolved students in better access to their education. As an attorney, Mr. Bauman has successfully represented a wide variety of clients in cases including child support, special needs trust, and guardianship. And he believes that every student can learn. He is an active participant in his community for special needs programs from anywhere from the foundation of the Helena Miracle League, an organization for special needs children, to help them have the opportunity to get out and be active and play baseball. Such a wonderful thing for our kids because they are often forgotten in the arena of the school and sports. So Mr. Bauman is a wonderful advocate for our students. He is going to be joined by Carlton Ann Cook Walker. She wears many hats as well. She is an attorney, the parent of a blind child, which is now a young adult, and a certified teacher of blind and low vision students. Ms. Walker heads the Blindness Education and Advocacy Resource, LCC, and the acronym is BEAR, an educational consultant business for parents across the nation. She is the immediate past president of the National Organization of Blind Children, and she is the proud parent division. That is the proud parent division of the National Federation of the Blind. She also serves on the board of the Professionals in Blindness Education, another division of the National Federation of the Blind. I have worked alongside Ms. Walker as well, gaining access for students in their educational journey across the nation. So I would like to introduce you to Mr. Ken Bauman, and let's learn a little bit about IEPs this morning.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here, and it's a pleasure to get to speak with all of you today on a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. As said, I'm an attorney with the Galini Group. We a special education firm that specializes in taking care of kids with IEPs and 504 plans. I've also done, I said, special needs trusts, guardianships, and all those, all that other kind of fun stuff. I wanted to just kind of go through a little bit today and explain what, IEPs, what they are. There's essentially, I guess, three main statutory laws that we're looking at, the Americans with Disability Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and the Individual with Disability Education Act, the IDEA. Essentially, the mission is to ensure that all children with disabilities receive a free, appropriate public education and further education, employment, independent living. And that's the key right there, is to set our kids up with the ability to move forward, to get that education, not just academics, but communication, functional living skills, social emotional development. There's all these things. Our schools have a bad habit of focusing just on the academic portion of it, but it's all encompassing. So it's setting them up to be able to function further in life. So with that, some of the things that, you look at, research has shown that our children can thrive, and they have high expectations. That's one of the things I think was alluded to earlier, is that the sovereignty of low expectations. They they think, oh, we're doing them a favor. We're not going to burden them with math and with reading and all this. We're just going to, make them for children will allow them to achieve the maximum extent possible, be able to better themselves, have a good life, and eventually, go on to profitable things, careers, and other such things. So this it strengthens the role and responsibility of parents, ensuring that families of such children have meaningful opportunities to participate in the education of their children, both at school and at home. And with the IDEA, it's and IEPs that allows the parent to be a co-partner with the school. You are 50% of that team. The school is 50%, and then the parents are 50%. And so you have equal input as to your child's education. But you got to get eligible. And clearing that eligibility hurdle is sometimes the biggest problem that our kids face. How do I get eligible for an IEP? What are their criteria? So as you can see from this diagram, I've got, all children, the concentric circles working in. So all children, then it goes into all children with disabilities. One of
Say
the,
again, I'm sorry, do you want to share your screen? Because we don't see the concentric circles talking
okay.
about.
What do I need to do to share my screen? I'm sorry.
There's a bottom
Where's,
that says share
hold on.
screen. It's green.
There it is. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, can you see that now?
No, not yet.
Can you see that
Sometimes
now?
you do share screen and then you have
Oh
to
no.
confirm it, maybe.
Okay. Can you see that?
No,
Oh
unfortunately.
no. I apologize. Okay, well, if
Well, do you want,
that's okay.
okay.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Share screen. Okay. Are you seeing that now?
No, I'm sorry. Do you want, we could switch over to Carlton and have her present hers and see if I don't know if there's things you feel like you could kind of click around to see if it would.
Yeah, let me try that.
feel-
I apologize. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I understand technology is sometimes challenging.
I have not had
Carlton,
this problem before, so I apologize.
no, no worries.
Okay, hold on.
Carlton,
Let me
do you
try that.
want to jump in on 504s?
I think he has it.
Oh,
Okay,
there we go.
see that now?
The thread of it.
Perfect,
Okay.
yes.
You
Yeah.
see that now?
Yes, yeah.
All
Go ahead.
right. Sorry, everybody. So from the diagram here, you can see I have the concentric circles working with all children, and then all children with disabilities inside that. So unfortunately, not all children with disabilities qualify under Section 504 or the IDEA for an IEP. Merely having a disability does not automatically qualify you. So, but inside that, then there's children with physical or mental impairments, which is 504, which we're going to talk about later, and then the IDEA. So, is children who have one of the 13 disability categories. Okay. So these are the 13 disability categories that they have, and you can see those are autism, and that includes all the classical things with Asperger's, pervasive developmental delay, not otherwise specified. All the autism things are now on the spectrum, so it's all of that. Deaf blindness, deafness, developmental delay. That's usually only until age 9. At least in Alabama, some states may be different. In Alabama, that's usually till age 9 where they would get one of the other categories. Emotional disturbance, hearing impairment, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, which would be 2 or more of these, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, specific learning ability, speech, language, traumatic brain injury, or visual impairment. Now, for for a lot of kids, you say, well, my kid doesn't fall into that category. And that's why we have this category here, other health impairment. One of the things I hear a lot is, especially with, undiagnosed children with undiagnosed conditions. I have parents call me up and say, well, my son, my daughter has a chromosomal deletion, or, there's this, and say, okay, and the school doesn't know what to do. We have no idea what's going on. One of the things I've noticed with schools is that they are very rigid in their thinking. They're not necessarily problem solvers. If you give them a solution, sometimes they're willing to implement it, but they don't always do very well at solving the problem. So what I've had to do in those situations is I look at, what the parent is telling me the child is going through, saying, well, they have this rare genetic condition and only, one in every million people or so have this. And there's nobody else in the district that even has heard about this. What do I do? Well, I look at it and I say, okay, well, how does this manifest? Say, well, I look at the manifestations. I look at how it's being presented. This is similar to autism. So I counsel parents and I say, hey, instead of saying, oh, my child has a chromosomal deletion, say, well, it behaves like autism. Okay. Now we know what to do with autism because, well, here's one of our categories for autism. Now they may not qualify under autism. It may still qualify under other health impairment, but you're giving the school kind of an opportunity to say, hey, this is what it's like that you already know how to deal with. And it's the same thing when I have kids with dyslexia. Sometimes schools don't like to hear the word dyslexia. We don't know what to do with dyslexia. Okay, but dyslexia is merely just a specific learning disability. Oh, well, we know about specific learning disability. Okay, we can handle that. Sometimes you have to help the school understand what the problem is. So just because it doesn't fit neatly in one of these 13 categories doesn't mean you can't get an IEP, doesn't mean you're not eligible. You just have to kind of know how to navigate things and get it in there. And that's where you can get the help from an advocate or the help from an attorney, or even, do a lot of research. I have a lot of parents who are wonderful advocates for their kids, who have researched these things, looked into these things, and that's great, and I applaud them. Sometimes you do have to go out and get an attorney. And I have a lot of people say, well, how much does that cost? Well, hey, the good news is that under the law, the parents' attorney's fees can be paid for by the school district if the parent's the prevailing party. So that's how we operate. Our firm, we don't charge a retainer for the parent. We take it basically on a contingency. If we take the case, we are taking the risk that we're going to get paid from the school district, and that's how we do it. So we don't charge the parents. So that way the cost shouldn't be effective. Now, as far as an advocate fees are not allowed to be recovered under the law the same way attorney fees are. Some advocates work with the parents, as far as fee structures and things like that. So that would be, I guess, unique to your area and your state. But as far as attorney's fees go, that can be done through the school if you have an attorney who's willing to do that. So specialized instruction, an IEP basically provides for specialized instruction, unique specialized instruction that is given to meet the individualized needs of the student. It's not oh, hey, this is the program we use for everybody, and this is what we're going to provide for your child. No, we have to find a program that's going to work for your child. You don't alter the child to fit the school, you alter the school to fit the child. And that's the whole point of the IDEA and for the IEPs. Along with that are related services. Related services can mean transportation, such as riding the bus. If the student needs transportation to get back and forth to school, then that is a right under the IDEA. Whatever is necessary to provide them a free, appropriate public education and access to that free, appropriate public education. Okay. When you have an IEP, there's a team members. and you hear them talk about, well, the IEP team and who's on the team and who are the team members. Under the statute, there's specifically stated the parent, as I said previously, is 50% of that, and the school is 50% of that. So the parents are required to be there. For the school, they're required to have a general education teacher, a special education teacher, a local education authority, an LEA, and somebody who is qualified to interpret the results of assessments, testing, and things like that. Those are the only people that are required and named by law to be there. Now, I have parents that bring other family members, grandparents, aunts, uncles. You can bring other people if you want to, that's fine. Advocates, the school will oftentimes bring all kinds of people in. I've had rooms full of speech pathologists, occupational therapists, you name it, they've been there. But those people that I named are the only ones that are required by law to be part of that team. There is a book in Alabama, Mastering the Maze. I know some other states have similar type things. Texas has a program called, I think it's called Navigating the Maze, something like that. It goes through and talks about, and this is actually free from the Alabama Department of Education website. This is the guide for parents. The good thing about the IDEA is, since it's a federal law, it is pretty much uniform across all states. Each state has their own little tweaks in their administrative codes, but for the most part, the basics are going to be covered under federal law. So 99% of it's going to be the same. And in most states, a lot of them just basically copy the law into their statute, and it's identical. But things like this are available to help walk you through the IEP process and how to do that. There's also things, ask a special education attorney, which is what we have a Facebook group. It's a private closed group for parents and advocates. It's a free service by the Galini Group. So you can get questions answered and things like that. But we have a lot of roadblocks that are there that stand in the way and obstacles to creating successful programs for our students. So how do we navigate around those? How do we get around those? And what are those? There are a lot of things out there that the schools are putting in our way. Uniformity, teachers unions, obsession with safety. And that's one that I've seen, and zero tolerance discipline. Everybody gets punished regardless of who they are or what they do. Those are a lot of concerns that we have with some of our students. And I have defended far too many autistic children with felony charges because of things like zero tolerance discipline and safety obsessions of the school. Even the Every Student Succeeds Act, No Child Left Behind, while those are good intentions, sometimes they don't, produce good results. Standardized testing is one of those things. And it's, I could have an entire lesson about standardized testing. But we need to make sure that we're not allowing these obsessions to stand in the way of developing a good IEP. And there are ways around those. And so that's why learning how to navigate the system, you can avoid some of these good intentions that turn out bad. Another thing, humans don't like change. So when you come in with your, with the IEP team in the school and you start going, hey, we want to make big changes, we want to do these things. Well, sometimes the school's going to fight back. And again, just like knowing how to present the condition, you need to know how to present the solutions. Small increments. People have often, I've heard people say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. We don't need to make huge changes overnight. As long as we're making progress, sometimes the steps are small, sometimes the steps are big. But as long as we're making steps in the right direction, that's what we need to work at. We're not going to be able to change the system overnight, but we can change it one step at a time. And the IEP teams are trained to agree to changes in small increments. They will fight back if you come in and want to just change the entire school system. But if you can offer small progressive changes, they're more open to those ideas. And those are the things that we can put in IEPs to get that done. Testing, evaluations, those are key. As many evaluations as you can get, as many assessments that are done. A lot of times you'll hear the school say, well, we don't feel this is the best option, or we think that this may be better. I don't care how you feel. I don't care what you think. I want to see the data. Show me the data, show me the evaluations, show me the assessments. That's how we decide what the proper IEP is and what the how low is too low. Don't set our expectations too low. Don't set the bar low, because our kids can do more than we think they can. And remember that it's just business. It's not personal. Be civil while aggressively advocating. Don't get into a shouting match. Don't scream and yell. Be polite, be civil, but be aggressive in your advocacy for your child. And that's the best thing that, I can tell you is have the child in your best interest. Just remember that. So that's all I have. If there are any questions or anything, I guess I may be out of time, actually.
I'm
So-
thinking maybe we'll, thank you, Ken. Thank you so much. I know it's a difficult ask to do 15 minutes when you could spend a whole week covering, just a couple of these topics. I think what we're going to try and do is, Carlton, you can take your time, and then we do have at least one question in the chat, and I'll encourage people to ask their questions. And if we can't get to them, because I actually had some people just message me personally with questions. Would Carlton and Ken be open to just me contacting you afterwards to get answers to questions, and then I can get back to people as well? So
Definitely.
Certainly.
okay. So hopefully we'll be able to cover people's questions, but if not, I will for sure be in contact with the people that had questions and make sure that they get answered. But go ahead, Carlton.
Hi. Thank you, UDNF, for hosting this webinar. Thank you, Casey, for inviting me. And thank you, Ken, for a great presentation. My background is actually, my first advocacy was not for a blind child, other than my child. It was for a child with autism. But most of my advocacy is centered in the blindness, low vision arena. I also taught, as Casey said, as an itinerant teacher for a little more than 6 years in South Central Pennsylvania. So I've had kids who were my students who had any of the other 13, sometimes multiple of the other 13 or other 12 disability categories, as well as students in my students' classrooms, peers in my students' classrooms with disabilities. Casey did a great job of setting forth the problems that you're facing, not even being able to get a 504 plan, not even being able to get an IEP. For many, many years, we have focused on the IEP, because frankly, the law was geared toward IEP, and for students, 504 and ADA was very much an afterthought. And when I say 504, I'm talking about the section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And when I say ADA, I mean the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was passed in 1990. IEPs were brought about by the Individuals with Disabilities in Disabilities Education Act. Its predecessor legislation was passed in 1975. Why am I running through numbers? I love numbers, but it's not just because of that. It's because it helps us understand what these laws were meant to do and why we have them and how they can be implemented to help our students. In all facets of life, I've found that going to the why makes it much easier to find the answer. So why do we have these laws? First, okay, let me share my screen. And this is the one I want to look at first. It's just double check. Okay, there we go. The IDA, Section 504, and the ADA. These are the three main pieces of legislation that we're dealing with. Ken talked about the IDEA. It is available to individual with qualifying disabilities, so 13, from birth through high school graduation or age 21, whichever comes first. I will note some states, Michigan in particular, does push that 21 out, but what we're talking about here is what the federal law says. School districts have the duty to identify students with suspected disabilities. I think that's a really important factor for this group especially. That's called child find. And child find is a federal duty that the districts have to identify students. They can't just sit on their hands and wait for parents to come banging at the door, all that they do. If they are refusing to even, especially to even evaluate your child for an IEP, that's a potential child find violation. They need to either conduct the appropriate evaluations to determine if your child does qualify for an IEP, if not under one of the 12 enumerated categories, under other health impairment instead, perhaps. But and if they refuse that evaluation, they have to actually take you to court to refuse it, called due process. It's a flip, but they have the duty to do that unless they take it further, which most don't. Some do, but most don't. So that's something important to know. And if they fail to find your child or identify your child, that's a violation of their duties under the federal law, and it exposes them to liability for something called compensatory education, comp ed, we might hear, and that is funding. Either they fund their own staff to do it, or they fund somebody you choose to provide the education your child missed because of their failure to properly identify your child. Comp ed also comes into play for if they do not implement the IEP appropriately, or if it's a very, very inappropriate IEP. So that comp ed is definitely something you'd want to talk to your advocate or attorney about more, but it's the stick in the relationship. There are a lot of carrots. Ken talked about a lot of carrots, and they're important, very important to have carrots. But the school officials know that you have the stick in the back. You don't have to wave it at them, but it's important that you know that you have it. And as Ken mentioned, parents and school and staff and the student help prepare the IEP. There are rules about who must attend and when people can be excused from meetings. But there's also a catch-all category. Anyone that the parent or district feels is appropriate can provide good information to the IEP team, and that's where advocates and others can come in. Now, Section 504. Section 504, remember, 1973. So only 2 years before IDEA's the birth of IDEA, what the law that became IDEA. Section 504 is actually civil rights law. It is protection against disability-related discrimination. We know other civil rights laws protect against race-based discrimination, gender-based discrimination, age-based discrimination. This is for disability-based discrimination. And 504, there is no age cutoff. The eligibility for 504 accommodations is based on this disability and need for reasonable accommodations. So it's a protection against disability-related exclusion from the participation in or denial of the benefits of or of an activity or subjection to discrimination in a federally funded activity. And the disability we're talking about has to be a physical or mental impairment which substantially limits one or more major life activities. This actually applies far more to individuals without cute little perfect diagnoses, because we're looking at the impact of the disability on reading. And when we're looking at this, we're not saying that a blind child can't read. We're looking at reading regular text in textbooks or on a screen, however the school does it. Limited ability to interact with what is typical in the school. Examples could include children who don't have the stamina to hold a textbook, or who cannot handle the light coming from a computer screen. So that would be an impairment in reading, even if the person is fully literate. Writing, breathing, walking, standing. I mean, there are tons of major life activities. Eating. Breathing is such an important one, of course. And that impacts our kids. So 504 eligibility is not a high bar, let's put it that way. It especially in this group. It may be if we just go into a park and grab up 10 kids, but it is not a high bar for this group. And the program must be receiving federal financial assistance. Pretty much every school does. And that assistance would even include free lunch, but it would also include things like surplus food from U.S. Department of Agriculture. So 504 can also apply to private schools, many private schools. Now, again, it's civil rights law. So it focuses on opportunity to access programs and services. To get those reasonable accommodations, you do need to disclose the disability, provide proof of the disability. It doesn't mean that you have to release all medical records, but some medical records are really necessary, and request accommodations, and that the requested accommodations are reasonable. And that reasonability is based on two factors. One, is it an undue burden? Is it just horrifically costly? This is where when Ken talked about coming up with solutions, being solution focused is really helpful. Because a lot of schools just can't imagine how would we do this? This is so difficult. Oh, we can't even imagine it. Help them imagine it and help make it something that they can, oh, okay, we could make this happen. And also understand that undue burden is not, oh, well, you're asking us to spend $10,000 on one child. That sounds like a lot until you hear that their yearly budget is $2 million. Well, $10,000 isn't very much. And how much do they spend on all of their first graders, or even the first graders in that class? Hundreds of thousands when we're talking about staff salaries and such. So don't get worried too much about the undue burden part. And then the other one it cannot fundamentally alter the program. That's when the rubber really meets the road for a lot of our kids, because they may need modifications that do fundamentally alter the program. And in that case, an IEP is probably far more appropriate for that child. Now, remember what I said about Child Find. Let's say school says you can have a 504 plan, but no IEP. If your child should qualify for an IEP and the district refuses and offers only a 504 or something less, that's a Child Find violation too. Because 504 is talking about access. It's opening the doors. It may be temperature control. It may be Braille books, but it's not teaching you how to read Braille. It's not teaching a child how to communicate via sign language, or how to communicate via an assistive augmentative communication device. It's not providing that device. All of that good stuff is in the IEP, so that's really important. And I'm just going to touch on the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's very similar. It applies to all government facilities and to all public accommodations, which is very, very broad. Those public accommodations do not need to have be receiving federal financial assistance in any way to be subject to the Americans with Disabilities Act. There are a few exceptions, but it's pretty darn broad. Also, a lot of recent regulatory guidance from the U.S. Department of Education and laws are focusing more on ADA than 504. So it's just important for you to know that both exist. And here's the great thing. If your child is qualified via a disability, which your child probably almost certainly is, these are not time limited, neither one. These are from the onset of the disability till the cessation of the disability. So it can be from birth to death. It could be something in between. Whatever, that's what it is. And that's just so important to understand that you have that power. It's so important to know what the playing field is so you can get into the game, really. This is another document, and it focuses, what's the focus of legislation? ADA, eliminating discrimination. 504, access opportunities, both of them are those. IDEA, education, adequate education to students with disabilities. FAPE, free appropriate public education, that is also offered under Section 504, but in a much more limited way. Again, 504 is more about access. ADA brings more, or IDEA brings more in. And then IDEA also is focused on preparation for post-secondary life. Remember, child has 504 ADA for a lifetime. Don't have IDEA for a lifetime. And IDEA does provide more protections. So we have to use that time to prepare our children for post-secondary education, employment, and independent living. There, this is what I wanted. Legislation and practice. What the heck does this mean? Access to everything. 504 ADA. It's curricular materials, instruction, environment. It would include, this is definitely blindness focused, but Braille, Nemeth code, tactile graphics, enlarged print. It would include accessible digital materials, accessible software, and accessible, not just non-visually accessible to a blind child, accessible with augmentative and assistive communication devices. Things that maybe aren't timed, because even some of their practice programs are timed, and some kids can't deal with that time. That limits their access. So we have to have that access. It includes descriptive instruction. I told you that some instruction isn't included in 504 ADA, but some is. If I am describing something and say, okay, on this part of the map, blah, 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 on that part of the map, what the heck does that help? That can not only impact certainly students with low vision or blindness, but it also impacts children with ADHD who maybe cannot move their bodies to focus in that way, who cannot change their view points rapidly, who may not process that quickly. So more descriptive instruction is really important. And this applies to everything. It applies to regular education. It applies to specials. It applies to electives. It applies to related services. So speech, OT, PT, they need to be making things accessible too. And everything under access to everything is included in IDEA. But IDEA also adds disability-related instruction and assistive technology, devices, and services. I have a whole list: Braille, Nemeth code, accessible assistive technology, non-visual skills, orientation and mobility, ACC trials and implementation, grade level preparation, pre-teaching when necessary, expanded core curriculum, transition readiness, manual braille or refreshable braille displays, embosser, screen reader, magnification devices, QWERTY devices, AAC again, measuring tools, accessible measuring tools, accessible manipulatives for drawing, for creating, for child creating graphics, for concept development. So many important tools that our kids need. I am way over. So I do have another document that I hit on some of the questions that were sent earlier, but I'm going to be quiet now and let Sarah tell me what to do.
Oh, thank you so much for that. I love, you know, your use of just looking at ADA and IDEA and the 504 and kind of how those weave together and make it pretty complex, I think was helpful. And, you know, I think of, in my own experience and in working with families, I mean, you talked about a lot of things specific to blindness or vision impairment, but you know, things like environment, like controlling the temperature in the room, because I know a lot of our kids have like dysautonomia, and so, or dysautonomia, and so like controlling temperature, frequent breaks, needing to, you know, take a break from class, take bathroom breaks because of you know, issues around bladder or bowel control. And so, so I think, you know, trying to expand even outside of that blindness and blindness context, and thinking about you know, the environment, the breaks that are needed, and what specific needs your kid has that you can ask, that those a lot of times are applicable under the 504. We have just maybe a minute or two to answer. There was one question in the chat about getting help in college, and I know Carlton, you alluded to the IEP, and 504 is not really covering that, it sounds like, but perhaps something under the ADA. You know, I don't know kind of what, if you could speak to that for like a minute.
Absolutely. Both the ADA and 504 would apply. And they, again, it's access, but there are accommodations that are needed to access and to not be excluded from participation, to not be denied the benefits of activities, to not be subject to discrimination. Again, undue burden cannot be terribly expensive, but most of it isn't. And when we're looking at terribly expensive, we're looking at the entire college, not a dorm room. And it can include maybe attending classes via distance education when needed, having that option. That's free. Essentially, that's cheap and free. And it can't fundamentally alter the program, but very, very few things fundamentally alter a program. There are a lot of things that they're used to doing, but that doesn't mean not doing it that way fundamentally alters the program. It means that sometimes we have to really dig into the why. What is the purpose of this activity? Okay, now let's find out how we can provide access to that activity and opportunity to benefit from it.
Great, thank you. So a couple of things I just want to highlight before we end today. Just want to remind you that the Ken is here from the Galini group, and he highlighted on Facebook, they have a Ask a Special Education Attorney page that they run. So if you, or it's, I'm sorry, Ask a Special Ed Attorney, not Special Education Attorney, but if you search it, you should be able to find it on Facebook. And Carlton is from Bear Advocacy, BEAR, and you can contact her that way. I want to thank both of them and Casey for sharing your expertise. And like I said at the outset of this is a huge, huge topic that can't possibly be covered in depth in an hour. So thank you thank you for coming and sharing at least a little bit of a primer at least. So I'm going to share my screen quick in closing. Hold on here. Hold on. I am somewhat technically challenged, so. All right. So I'll start by saying that when we first announced that we would be offering this topic today on IEPs and 504s, people asked if it would be in the context of being undiagnosed or having an ultra-rare disease. And I hope today that you are able to, let's see here. Okay, that you're able to take the information that was shared and really apply it to your particular situation so that you can help your child access the education that they have a right to. Beyond this topic, however, there is importance and value in raising awareness that there's an entire subset of the rare disease population that is undiagnosed or has an ultra-rare disease. And the UDNF, we are working really hard to raise that awareness. April 29th is Undiagnosed Day, and we are excited to partner with the Wilhelm Foundation and Undiagnosed Diseases Network International with the theme, Building the Undiagnosed Community, Global Perspectives and Shared Action. Please go to our website or at udnf.org to register for this half-day event that will feature patients, caregivers, clinicians, and researchers from across the globe, highlighting the work being done with a focus on improving the diagnostic odyssey. So thank you so much for joining us today. Our next Together on Tuesday is Tuesday, I believe it's September 2nd. I don't have it written down. It's the first Tuesday in September. So the registration for that should be up shortly. And we look forward to seeing you then or even earlier on Undiagnosed Day. Thank you so much.